Howdy, y'all. This is Market Explainer, America's #1 business news podcast. Let's just jump into this last story. But before we do that, I want to tell all of you about Powerhouse Drones. If you are interested in getting into owning a drone, what kind of drone you should get, all that stuff, my website, powerhousedrones.com, has all that information, and we will sort out the right drone for you and your projects. So this next story, it's got a little moss on it, a little older, but it's still hilarious. Mass Mutual, which was the insurer that at one point in time had employed Roaring Kitty, the guy who basically set off the entire, not set off, maybe not the right word.
Meme stock, but had a lot to do with
the guy who popularized.
Yes.
The guy who popularized meme stocks,
right?
Roaring Kitty, had at one point in time been employed by the insurer Mass Mutual. Well, Mass Mutual has now been fined for $4 million.
Look, this is what people look. I know a bunch of financial advisors, right?
Yes.
At all different levels, right? And
mutually, we probably know about 10 or 15, right?
Right. And whether most people may or may not know this about people that work in the finance industry at any level, right?
Right.
When you're talking about Mass Mutual, when you're talking about TD Ameritrade, whatever, in the financial industry, there are an insane amount of regulations of what people that work in that industry can and can't do, right?
And say.
Right. So that's why you don't ever see a TV commercial about an individual financial advisor. It has to be about the company, right? There's a whole bunch of guidelines about what they can and can't do. This is basically predicated because that guy, Gill, right, is his name, Keith Gill. Keith worked for the company Mass Mutual. He was not a financial advisor. He was not a licensed financial agent or anything like that. But he did work for Mass Mutual, which makes his guidelines very specific. He violated those guidelines in his 250 hours of YouTube videos on companies like GameStop and BlackBerry and yada yada. And the government has finally come out, like they do on the back end of things, and saying you and Mass Mutual are going to be fined, in this case, millions of dollars. Because Mass Mutual in this case, which I guarantee you, Mass Mutual, whoever's in charge of liability at Mass Mutual, had no idea until they got a letter from the court system.
And this is so weird because I think his YouTubing really only took off. Like, there was a small overlap in time, if I recall correctly. But it wasn't that long of a period of time.
Their argument in the court case, and I went through and read some of this stuff, their argument in the court case was, even though the majority of the information that he did, YouTube videos and training videos that he did, was out after his employment at Mass Mutual, he used information that he gained at Mass Mutual to be able to do those videos, so it still tracks. It's still effective.
But they're saying that they failed. The case that the government has made here is that Mass Mutual failed to properly supervise him. But we're seeing this in other verticals of employment. The government is coming down on people and saying, "Hey, you have to do a better job of keeping these people in line." We're reaching a point, both in the financial sector and other sectors. We're not a political show. I'm not trying to make a political statement, but it feels as though the government is outsourcing. It's like, the micromanagement and micro regulation of individuals to do what they say and want to corporations, and saying, hey, it's your responsibility to clamp down on the people when these people have, ostensibly rights to just talk because of the First Amendment.
Well, but it's always been that way. What has changed, though, is technology makes that very difficult, right? If this was 40 years ago, this guy loses his job, and then he goes out and finds whatever many people to give him money to buy
As
GameStop
a
at the time,
newsletter. Right,
and
yeah.
goes from $19 to $419, right?
Right.
And he makes money, nobody would ever know or care, right?
Right.
But we live in a world of technology. Here's what I think is the greater problem that they're trying to get a hold of with these massive fines is
Right.
they're trying to put it off. How in a world of technology,
Right.
in a world where we can go to Reddit and post things, we can post things on YouTube or whatever, I
Right.
can create the masses and get them on board with something. How do we mitigate that? How do we control that when if I have a bad experience at a local Austin bakery and I can go on the internet, and if I go viral talking about this Austin bakery, there can be enough backsplash from people all around the world to get that bakery closed down.
Right.
How do I mitigate that as a government, even if what I'm saying is a complete lie? Right?
And I think that notion, again, we're not a political show, and I'm not trying to be political.
Right.
I'm just saying it sets a bad precedent when the government is trying to get because they realize the government is maybe hamstrung or they're handcuffed from being able to regulate individual behavior on this.
Right. Yeah, because they can't go directly after him. Right?
Yeah,
they can't go directly.
scale.
What he did with the YouTube videos is freedom of speech, right?
Yes.
He was only putting information out there. He didn't force anybody to make a trade. He didn't force anybody to buy or sell or whatever. So they couldn't go directly after him. This is one of those where they're going to go after, an intern somewhere in the government found that he worked at Mass Mutual 2 weeks before he started, his videos went viral or whatever. And somebody at the government would go, that's it. That's it.
And then, this is there. So here's where my hope and optimism comes from, which for a lot of people seems backwards. But I think what's going to happen, and I think the long-term ramifications of this is people are going to start to really think about more carefully. Do I want to go be under the thumb of this corporation that's operating on behalf of the government to regulate my behavior in and outside of this office?
Right.
Or do I want to go be my own man and do my own thing and create my own platform and build my own endeavor or whatever? And that's where I think the precipice of the story with this lands is, I think we're going to start seeing more and more people not go to big companies because they can go build. If you can build a position for yourself, just making $100,000 a year, right? Building a micro business, and that's what it would be, a micro business where one person makes $100,000 in profit a year, isn't like a crazy concept. It's not a crazy notion. And I think a lot of people are going to look at stuff like this and go, well, geez, I know there was a kid a couple of years ago, he just made YouTube videos about playing basketball, and he went, I think it was the kid who Tom Segura was making a video with when he injured himself last year, fellow Austinite now.
That was awful, but yes.
Yeah. And the whatever regulating body said, hey, listen, you have the potential to profit from these videos, so you have to choose. You can either play college ball or make YouTube videos. And he said, yeah, I'm going to go make YouTube videos instead. And I think that, unfortunately, a lot of people are going to be faced with these choices of, do I want to have a face or a public? Do I want to have anything outside of my work? Because my work is, again, the corporation, your management, they're hamstrung because the regulators coming down on them saying, hey, if you have an opinion on X, Y, and Z outside of this office, you can't work here. Right. And I think that's an interesting question. As a business podcast, we have to ask the question, is that a potential future that harms the ability for corporations, which are currently, right now, my buddy was telling me his teenage kid got a job at McDonald's making $60 an hour. I worked corporate jobs for less money in an office, had to wear a nice shirt to work, couldn't wear jeans. Yep. And I thought, this is how awful the job market is for the employer. Doesn't this hurt the employer further going down the road, wouldn't you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I think you're already seeing that trend take effect. If you look at, for example, the finance industry, we've known for a decade now that the finance industry, from a personnel standpoint, is looking for the next 10 years from 2020 to 2030 is looking at a HR collapse because of the age gap between of financial advisors. You have financial advisors that have been in it for 30 years that are now in their 60s. They're ready to finish working, but there's not a lot of people in the middle. They're either these old financial advisors that have been around forever, or these young kids without any, you know what I mean, without the knowledge and experience and stuff like that. And they've known that forever and done very little to close that gap, right?
Right.
And as these older folks begin to retire, the question then becomes, as a young person, as a millennial and Gen Zer, why should I go into finance and now be regulated heavily?
Right.
Where I can only do A, B, and C to build my business. It's not illegal to go on YouTube and build out a penny stock portfolio, right? How many of those are out there of people that go, no, they make videos of a chart. I think this is going to go up next week. And if they have enough people behind them to go out and buy that penny stock, to buy that whatever, how many of them can make $100,000 a year by people subscribing to their $3 newsletter or whatever it is?
Whatever it is, their Substack.
Right? And they don't work for a financial institution. They're not regulated by anyone. They can say anything they want, and they can be wrong half the time. They can be right half the time. And as long as they're right enough of the time, or make it seem like they were right enough of the time, you're done, right? You get your subscribers, your mailing list, your whatever, your Patreon, and you go on about your business. And I don't know that the regulators have an answer for that right now.
Of course they don't. They never have the answer. They show up after the crisis and say, well, if you give us a bunch of money, we'll fix it. And then the regulators get jobs as regulators, and then they do that for 5 years, and then they go off to some private firm to make the real money.
Right.
That's the scam.
I mean, but that's again, I don't know that they have. If you turned around tomorrow and all the people that were potentially ready to retire in the financial industry, the finance industry, as most people know it, would collapse because there wouldn't be enough brokers, there wouldn't be enough people licensed, that kind of thing. Now, there are people that, and I've talked to people in the finance industry that say, hey, that would be a good thing. The finance industry is old and outdated, and it needs to be replaced with something more easily accessible. People should be able to do more with their money without brokers. And hey, let me, yada yada.
And let's point out, I got a bunch of money tucked away with some robo-advisor. I don't need some guy telling me what to do. Some algorithm some other guy wrote will do it all for me and it'll take it'll take 0.25%, and the broker will take, so it works out,
Yeah, I mean, look, TD Ameritrade started 5 or 6, 7 years ago with employing people that aren't licensed, that are essentially customer service agents. That if you want to call in and make a trade and not have any advice, they're there to help you, right? They realized that there was an amount of money to be made, but there was a gap to be made about, hey, you want to do X, Y, and Z, and you don't want to, you know what I mean? And it allows them to not be responsible, right? You're calling in saying, I want X, and this customer service agent is being paid to just do what you tell them.
To execute your thing,
Right.
Very good. Well, I think that wraps up our show for today.
It does.
You want to, of course, all of our sponsors are down in the description. Click those, go to our website, check out our Patreon. It only took 2 months. We finally got our Facebook page with the correct name on it. They continued to try. It took forever.
We're going to do that as another thing on our Patreon. Is we're going to have Danny tell us the 2-month story of how he got our name changed on Facebook.
But there's no story. All I could do on this video would be smash my laptop against the wall.
Well, that's what the story. That's what the video would be.
Hey, I literally called Facebook.
Oh God!
I found their phone number and called them.
Did anybody ever answer?
No. But that's not the point. The point isn't that nobody answered. The point is that I called them.
I'm going to make Danny do that as a Patreon video. Is tell us exactly how he feels about the Facebook transition. All right, Danny, do you have one of your stupid comments for us here for the end?
I do not have a stupid comment for you. I just want to leave everybody with this 4-word phrase: Black Swan Event Horizon.
I don't know what that is. And anyway, see you
By
next
the time you
folks.
figure it out, it'll be too late.